Back to live, authentic nerdery, Mega Brainiacs. I am John Michelle, your shepherd through the land of nerdy things. And tonight, I am very excited to have a guest with me that I get to see far too little of. Joining us from sunny California is comic book writer, screenwriter, editor, director, producer, and actor, Mr. David Avallone. Welcome, my
Good
friend.
evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm keeping busy. I'm looking forward to flying to New York in a couple of days. That'll be very
Uh,
exciting for me.
yeah,
And
and the weather is here to meet you. So make sure you have
I
your
heard
shorts.
that there's I heard that there's thunderstorms at the end of the week. Is that right? Is that what's coming for me?
Possibly, like
Yeah,
for the most, we've been having a lot of that. Occasionally, it's just a lot of bark and no bite, but
sure.
we've had it get dumped on us. So pack accordingly.
Yeah, I'll have an overcoat, and my wife usually has a portable umbrella
Oh,
some hidden
nice.
somewhere on her person when we're in New York City. Otherwise, we can just buy that $5 umbrella on the street that lasts 3 blocks.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
The
this thing
well,
will,
that's done.
yeah, this thing will stay open at least until the Lyft driver gets here. And yeah, so we're looking forward to that.
Um, so in your intro, I mentioned you do a lot of things.
Yes, I don't
Uh,
still do all of them, and I sure don't do all of them at the same time.
yeah,
Uh,
you have done a lot of things.
yes, yes, I
Um,
have a long period of. We were talking about this a little bit before we went live. That I've been broke enough that I will say yes to pretty much anything reasonable. Uh, for a very long time, I was living like that and did whatever I could do to make a buck. And
yeah,
now things are. I have better choices now, which is good. But I'll say yes to a lot of things. I mean, literally, I don't have a writing agent.
okay.
I have an acting agent though.
Well,
I think is the most ridiculous thing in the world. But I did play a lawyer in a low budget docudrama about 2 months ago. I have no idea when or if it will ever come out, but that was just a
yeah.
funny thing.
Hey man, my two children are in a very oddly wacky Brazilian movie that's on Netflix.
Oh yeah, what's it called?
um it's called Diary of an Exchange Student. Yeah,
Nice.
it's their one foray into acting.
It's a fun gig, and particularly as someone who has had like all of the pressure. If you've produced or directed, I've been a script supervisor, I've been a first AD.
Yeah,
Those are high pressure jobs. The kind of parts I get in movies, I'm usually a guy with 5 lines: angry scientist, bitter lawyer, whatever. Uh, and man, that's like a vacation. You show up,
yeah.
you put on some clothes, you say your 5 things, and you don't have to worry about how anything is going. It's not your problem. I'm so used to being on a movie set and everything is my problem.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to show
It's
up and
it's
go,
nice when it's like all you got to do is this. Just do
yeah,
this
I
thing.
just got to hit that mark, look the other guy in the eye, and say the 3 things, and then I get to go home. So it's a
Well,
it's a funny gig.
we are here for something a little Hollywood adjacent.
That
We're
is
here
true.
for your comic book writing. And
Yeah.
so how did you get started in comics? Like how did you go from,
Well,
acting and producing and everything like
the
that
the funny
to
thing the funny thing is, I always like to tell the story of how I almost got involved and failed. Like the door opened and I wasn't able to walk through it because I think it
I feel
illustrates.
like that's most people's stories who are
Well,
like, I
but
really want to get into
it
comics.
also illustrates the important point that there is no such thing as your last chance at something.
Yeah.
This is as big a chance as you could possibly get. I was at a cocktail party in Hollywood North Hollywood, technically, with a bunch of writer friends. And I
Yeah.
was introduced to a guy. This is like 2002, maybe 2003. Introduced to a nice guy. We had a conversation about movies. What's your name, nice guy? I'm Joe Quesada.
Oh.
And he was at the time, even then, I think editor in
Oh
chief
yeah.
of Marvel Comics.
That he was.
And I actually sometimes do panels and talks at comic book conventions about networking because I think people are bad at it and they don't understand how to do it right, and that it's about making friends who you might someday work with, maybe, but never like approaching someone with dollar signs in your eyes.
Yeah, because I feel like the crux of getting a gig is when somebody in the position to give you a gig is able to say, "Oh, I know that person,
I like
and
that guy.
I
Yeah.
like that person." And I think if we were stuck in a room for like a few hours trying to figure out whatever it is we're trying to produce, I don't think we would want to kill them.
Yeah, I think it would be a pleasant experience. So
Yeah.
Joe Quesada and I were talking movies, and he said, "Would you, hey, you ever think about writing comic books?" And I was a lifelong reader,
Yeah.
but it was one of those things like I got, as you were listening, I got enough careers, I got enough doors being slammed in my face. I don't need one more door. But here's the editor in chief of Marvel. So he gave me his email address, and he handed me off to Tom Brevoort.
Yeah.
And at the time, and I think this is what screwed me up, they had a new writers program, and
Oh,
Tom just
yeah.
kind of slotted me into that. And I sent them a writing sample, a sci-fi short I had written. And they're like, "This is great. We love this. Now, here's how you get into our young writers program. I wasn't that young. You write a first issue of a completely new comic book that you've created." Now, I didn't have that standing around, and I
Yeah.
had never written a comic book before. And I'm not a superhero guy, and this was a pitch for Marvel.
Yeah.
So I came up with something, but it took me forever. And by the time I was even close to finishing the script, that particular iteration of the writers
Was over.
program was over, door slammed, and I had enough going on, trying to make
That
some
you
revenue,
weren't scrambling for this
that I
gig.
wasn't like, no, the most important thing I should do right now is get Joe Quesada back on an email and say, "Hey man, can you find another door for me to walk through?"
Yeah.
And that was 20 years ago, right? That's like I said, 2002,
Yeah.
2003.
I think that was probably, I think we were in, or I think I was in LA at the same
Funny.
time that you were at that time.
So in 2014, a friend of mine read an old script of mine and said, "Oh, hey, you're a really great writer." And I was like, "I know," because I'm like that. And also, when you're a really great writer that no one will employ as a writer, you get a little edgy about it.
Yeah.
So she said, "Well, I can recommend you to some comic book editors." And long story short, I met Joe Rybant from Dynamite at San Diego Comic-Con 2014.
Nice.
So July 2014, and we hit it off. And again, did we talk about comic books? Absolutely not. We mostly talked about movies and books and whatever.
Nice.
And I like Joe.
The important stuff.
Yeah, I like Joe. He's a good guy. And, one of the things that I think the reason my friend at the time wanted me to talk to Dynamite is for someone of my age, and I'm not young, but for someone of my generation,
a person of a certain age, as they like to say.
I have a background in the pulps, which Dynamite was then doing a lot with.
Yeah, they've always had.
I'm
some
56,
really good pulp.
but the average Doc Savage fan is quite a bit older than 56.
Yeah.
And I said, "Look, I grew up with this stuff."
I will note that back in 2006, I for some reason thought, "Hey, I'm a nobody. I'm going to go find out who has the rights to Doc Savage and see if I can get permission to write a new Doc Savage novel." And that didn't end well. But,
you can pay them a lot for that permission.
Yeah.
There's a writer named Will Murray who pays them to write original Doc Savage novels. But
I ended up just writing essentially Doc Savage fan fiction, and I started like a blog spot for it. And I was like, this works.
Fun.
But yeah,
Did you grow up with like the Bantam paperbacks? Is that why you had known who Doc Savage was?
So I first knew who Doc Savage was because of the Ron Eli
Oh,
film.
sure.
And when I saw that, I was like, what is this thing? And then that's
That's a crazy movie.
yeah. And then I
That was a
found
very
out about
crazy
the
movie.
books. I got a hold of a couple of the books and ended up loving those. And then I fell down this rabbit hole of The Destroyer, which,
Sure.
then I found Fred Ward's Remo Williams film.
Sure.
And
Sure.
speaking of which, rest in peace, Mr. Ward.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, I always loved like those kind of pulpy action
Sure. No, I was
heroes.
just curious because it is unusual for anyone like under 65
Yeah,
to remember Doc Savage. So, anyway, long story
especially a
short,
weird little black kid from the suburbs.
right? So Joe said, "Well, look, I'll go back to New York or Jersey where Dynamite is, and I'll see what I can turn up for you."
Cool.
And the first thing he turned up was a steampunk Vampirella series that was an
Oh,
offshoot of a universe created by Bill Willingham. Bill Willingham did a thing called Legendary,
oh, I
where
love Bill Willingham.
Bill folded all of the Dynamite licensed characters into a single universe. So
Oh,
Red Sonja, I think even the Phantom at the time, Vampirella, Green Hornet, Flash Gordon, and it was
I've
all.
never seen this.
Yeah, it's called Legendary. The premise of the series is basically, and it takes a while to get there and tell you what the origin story is. But I think the origin story is Flash Gordon crash lands on a relatively primitive planet, and they engineer his technology, and it ends up being like a Victorian steampunky world in which Flash Gordon is kind of the hidden king.
All right,
But it's
that's kind of
really
cool.
another planet. But like the big city is called the city, and there's the jungle, and there, it's very,
Okay,
it's all very archetypal,
archetypical.
archetypal. And the best gag that Bill does in the series is they also had the $6 Million Man at the time. And there's a
Ooh,
scene
yeah.
where Steve Austin and Oscar Goldman, and Steve is in a wheelchair, missing limbs. They're getting on a Zeppelin, and their luggage is this big, heavy thing. And Oscar Goldman says, "Be careful with that. That's worth $6,000." And I thought the idea that in Victorian times he's the $6,000 man, that's a
Yeah,
very good joke. That is a
that
very,
is a
very
really good
fucking
joke.
solid joke. But anyway, so I wrote an issue of Steampunk Vampirella. I wrote 5 issues of it. Uh, and I hadn't studied comics from childhood. I studied movies from the point of view of I want to make them, I want to know how they tick, I want to pull them apart. I
Yeah.
had never read comic books with that kind of critical eye. So I literally went to my shelves and went, The Watchmen is 9-page panels. Fascinating. New Frontier is 3 CinemaScope panels per page. Fast. And every once in a while you jump out to a splash. But like the construction of comic books was not something I'd thought about. So
Hmm.
wanting to take it seriously and wanting to succeed this second time that the door opened for me, I reread all my Scott McCloud like a good boy. I read a couple of Will Eisner books while I was working on the project, and I turned in 5 perfectly drawable scripts that made for nice comic books. The first 2 I did, I was so concerned about doing the job well and not screwing over the artist. I drew my own sketches of every page just to see this is all going to fit, right?
Yeah.
This is all going to flow. This is going to make sense. And I didn't show them the artist. And my favorite thing, I posted this on a blog years ago because I just was really happy about it.
Yeah.
His pages, or I should say, my pages, which the artist never saw, looked like a 5-year-old had tried to copy what he did. You know what I mean? They were that close.
Yeah.
Like he had never
That's,
seen them.
I mean, that's encouraging though.
Yeah,
Like
it was totally
that's,
encouraging. It was
yeah.
totally encouraging. One of my most recent projects is this really abstract thing. It's an adaptation of a Blondie song called Dreaming.
Oh,
It's
what?
for
Wait,
Z2.
this is something that you're working on a Z2?
It's a Z2 thing.
Oh,
And Lisa
cool.
Weber from Hex 11 is drawing it. And I gotta say, you know, not to break my arm patting my own back, it's dreaming. It's a very abstract script.
Yeah, it
And
is ethereal incarnate,
yeah.
like that song.
And when I got the pages, when I got Lisa's layouts back, I was like, unbelievably, this kind of looks exactly like I expected it to look, in spite of how weird and abstract this script was. So I feel like I have a good handle on that part. That came now,
Nice.
you know, working on films, the whole point, a comic book crew is a maximum of 6 people, maybe.
Yeah.
If you got a flatter and a colorist, you know, like if you have an inker and a penciler, you got
And then
maybe
don't
6,
forget
7 people in
letters.
there. Yeah. But I never forget. Taylor Esposito will never let me forget letters. Uh, so you got to communicate, you know, to those 6, 7 people. A
Yeah.
movie, you're communicating to way
1,000.
more people,
Yeah.
and people who don't, you know, who some of them are like very interested in misunderstanding you. So, and being an editor, I think particularly constructing narrative sequentially, you know, there's the world's greatest film editor, a guy named Walter Murch, a great philosopher of film.
Related
One
to
of the
Fred
ways,
Merch?
one of the
No, that was
ways,
Mertz.
no, yeah, one of the ways that he edits a movie and visually represents what he's done in the movie is he takes screen grabs of the vital moment in the scene,
Yeah.
the vital one frame, and he sort of storyboards the movie as he edits with like, this is what this movie looks like. He's making a comic book
Yeah.
essentially out. He's making a fumetti act technically, but he's making a comic book out of the movie. And that thing of the, and of course, like all people who come from film, I had to get out of the trap of writing a panel in which 4 things happen. You know, panel one, she
Where
crosses the room.
everything happens from like this.
Yeah, panel
Yeah.
one, she crosses the room, puts down her purse, lights a cigarette, and pours herself a drink. No, that's 7, buddy. You have described a page, not a
Yeah.
panel. You know, you have to get past that. But yeah, I think I got past it pretty quick. But and then, you know, development wise, just past how I got started, Dynamite was pleased with what I've done, and they have. It was a little slower in the first couple of years, but they have
Mhm.
published me pretty much nonstop, at least since 2016. I've had some book or another come from them at some time or another. So Joe and I have a
That
great
is
relationship.
awesome.
I have a great relationship with Nikki, who's the president CEO over there, and lovely guy. And they treat me well. So, and I will say, it's like I'm given a lot of creative freedom there, and that is one of the main reasons I'm loyal to them. Is they really don't try to control what I write, and that's a beautiful
Well,
thing.
which I have to say it's to their benefit because
Oh, thank you.
you really like you get to like the heart and the spirit. Or so I was really happy when you sent me the latest issue. Just for everybody that doesn't know, so we're here because Joe's latest issue is Elvira in Horrorland. Issue number 1 is
Number
coming
one.
out on the 25th, I believe.
Yeah, that's the Wednesday, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Wednesday is the 25th.
Yep.
And I was literally like about to message you like, hey, can I just get a copy of the comic so I can read it? And you would already like beat me to it. And
Sure.
I've been just a lifelong fan of Elvira. I think everybody that just kind of grew up throughout the the 80s,
Sure.
she was a part of the
Yeah,
zeitgeist.
absolutely.
And you you write her voice. Like it's so
I
weird.
do.
Like as I'm reading this, every beat, like I'm reading this as if she's doing it.
Honestly, it's easy. I mean, maybe it hasn't been easy for everyone all along, but she's created an indelible character.
Yeah.
And the character has such a clearly defined attitude towards life
Mm-hmm.
that the reason it seems to people like I really get her voice is just because both of us, me and the reader, know what Elvira would say in any given
Yeah.
situation. So I'm writing it and you're reading it and going, yeah, that's what Elvira would say. And that's and a funny thing, when I last time I had dinner and drinks with Cassandra Peterson, the real Elvira,
Yeah.
brought my wife along, who finally got her wish and met. When I was offered the job, I thought about not taking it, and she said, "You're taking it because I want to meet her." And I said, "Okay, fair."
Okay, and just for those who don't know, your wife is
Augusta
your wife
Avallone.
is, and what does she do?
Well, she is a semi-retired burlesque dancer and burlesque producer, which is also, I give
I
that a great deal of credit for why I understand Elvira.
Yeah.
Because
I would think that you'd be in the proverbial doghouse if you were
yeah,
like,
yeah,
like you could have gone to dinner, but I didn't
yeah,
bring you.
yeah. No, it was for a project we were one of the Kickstarter projects. I needed anecdotes from her life, and she said that, honey, that's not a phone call. we gotta be sitting together with drinks in our hands. I was like, well, great. I'm not gonna say no to that. But when we had dinner together, I should mention my wife, aside from being a burlesque dancer and impresaria, is a costume designer and costume maker. And three of her last jobs making costumes were Star Trek Picard, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Loki. So she's also a giant nerd and loves working in those universes.
Good
She
gravy.
can't wait for Obi-Wan Kenobi to drop on Friday.
Dude, I love you, but when you guys get here, I may monopolize your wife's time
That's fine. That is
a bit.
absolutely. I'm sure she is. I can hear her giggling. She is delighted by that. But yeah, no, she had a great time working on those shows. So yeah, she's an enormous part of my world and my inspiration, and connected to everything I do. And the point of this was, when Cassandra met her, she was like, I really thought you were gay. And I was like, why is that? And she said, well, literally no straight man has ever written me well. She's like, every gay man that has worked, and I'm sure she's thinking of the dear departed John Paragon, who
Mhm.
wrote with her and was her writing partner.
Oh yeah.
Um, but but yeah, she's like, every good Elvira writer has always been gay, and the straight guys always just kind of miss it somewhat. And I said,
They just throw in a whole lot of straight boy nonsense.
I guess I said, the thing is, to me, it's not that I'm coming at it from gay, straight, whatever. It's,
Yeah.
to me, it's the genius of what she created with the character is that she looks like a Playboy model, and she has the persona of a 70-year-old Jewish stand-up comic from the Catskills. And
Exactly.
it's that I can easily write Mel Brooks.
Yeah.
So writing hot lady Mel Brooks is a really funny niche that she
I
created, and she dominates. And I was
She is
just,
forever hot lady Mel Brooks to me.
yeah, I was just so the second issue of Elvira and Horrorland, the first one, well, actually, no, it's in the first issue that you read.
Yeah.
The Marion Crane Janet Leigh character
Oh yeah.
actually says to her, you look like a Charles Adams drawing of a Playboy model.
Yeah.
And I was trying to like nail that exact appeal. Cause
So for those that don't know, let me just
sure.
sidebar. So Elvira in Horrorland, the premise of it is essentially Elvira is uh sort of hopping from horror film to horror film in each issue. And issue one takes place in Psycho,
Yeah.
and the comic book is in black and white for most of it.
Yeah.
Um and
We won't spoil why color comes in at the end, but yeah.
Yeah, which was I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And as soon as I got it, I was like, oh, this is
Good.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Um
I didn't want to, I
it's
didn't
so
want
funny.
Sylvia to labor that likeness too much.
I'm glad that he didn't,
Yeah.
because yeah.
Sylvia
Oh, she.
Califano, but yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right.
Um as I was reading, like I kind of got to that part and I'm like, what is going on here? But the narrative kind of just,
Yeah,
it pushes you along a little
yeah,
bit, and I was like, oh, I guess I'll figure that out. And when you get that beat of what is actually happening, it lands
good,
so well.
good.
Yeah.
I like
Um,
the idea. I mean, the idea that's the premise. It was set up in issue 5 of Elvira meets Vincent Price, that
yeah,
movies create their own little parallel dimensions where their stories just play over and over again. I kind of liked that as an idea. And in the
yeah,
first issue, I had Vincent step out of House on Haunted Hill to meet Elvira.
yeah,
So we already had set up the idea of Vincent as a ghost was able to sort of like use a movie to get himself into a different dimension, into our world. So when they asked me to do a 5th issue of Elvira Vincent from Price, after I'd wrapped up the main story, I was like, well, let me play around with the whole movie universe idea. And then they asked me to pitch something new. And I said, oh, let's just have her keep going through movies. And Psycho was just a nice natural. I just
yeah,
thought I needed a cliffhanger in 5 where people would just get it.
yeah.
You know what I mean? They'd see the background and go, oh,
It's like once
um,
you see the house,
yeah,
you know exactly where you're going.
yeah. And, because it's a parody for a lot of reasons, because it's a parody, but also because he was a friend of mine and I like paying tribute to him. Robert Bloch, the author of Psycho, the
Mhm.
the hotel is Bloch's Motel instead of
Yeah.
Bates Hotel. He's Norbert Bates instead of Norman Bates and all of that.
I liked the Norbert. Like there was something about using that name that felt
Yeah.
like to use your turn of phrase, it felt appropriately Mel Brooks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's if the most I actually hit that nail on the head in Elvira, in The Shape of Elvira. I don't know if you read that one. It's a 4-issue long parody of The Shape of Water.
Oh no, I didn't
And
read
the
that one.
premise is that the Del Toro type director casts her in a movie. I think the movie is called The Heart is a Black Lagoon. And it's a romantic Brazilian river monster movie. But we find out along the way that the Del Toro character is nuts and is literally trying to mate her with a
with
real
an
Brazilian
actual.
with an actual monster. Yeah, the running gag is he tells her, your leading man is very method. You'll never see him out of the costume. He's always going to use that weird bubbly voice and all that. And a running gag is she keeps saying, "Is it Christian Bale? Is it Jared Leto under there?
Nice.
who's that method? It's too tall to be Daniel Day-Lewis. It couldn't be him." But by the 4th issue, I needed a mad scientist character to come in to sort of seal the deal. And I
So
literally, it's Mel Brooks from the Muppet movie.
oh
It's I called him Dr. Kaminsky because that's Mel Brooks' real name,
yeah,
but it's Dr. Craftsman, a leading
and
expert in mind control and fraud.
rendered to be Mel
Oh
Brooks.
yeah, the artist absolutely drew Mel Brooks.
Oh
It's
God, I love this.
it's
Okay, I gotta
but
read
yeah,
it.
I love that character. So it's possibly the funniest line to me in the history of movies is uh, Charles Durning says, Dr. Craftsman here is a leading expert in mind control and frogs. And Brooks says, it's a rapidly growing field. I I love jokes like that. Is my favorite kind of joke is about logic that sounds like it works, but it totally is insane. And
Yeah,
mind control and frogs being it's a rapidly growing field. He says it with such calm conviction. It
I
kills me. So I needed a mad scientist character connected to like amphibious swamp creatures, and I went, oh shit, Dr. Krasman from the Muppet movie is the
I
guy.
love that.
You know,
I mean, it's the Muppet movie. I feel like all like the Muppet movie, Muppets Take Manhattan. I was always it's one of those are films that like I always found myself going back to, not just
Mhm.
because I used to pretend that Jim Henson was my real dad, but um because as you kind of get older, you constantly find stuff like that. Like the whole opening scene of what was it, Dom DeLuise in the canoe, and he's trying to find his mantra, and
Yeah.
like I I loved that Jim Henson didn't assume that kids were stupid.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And
Oh, yeah.
I think, yeah, that was like part of his brilliance.
Yeah. No, I grew up with Bugs Bunny cartoons, which are also a huge influence on the
Yeah.
Elvira comics. I try to keep Bugs Bunny and the Marx Brothers are the biggest influence on the pacing. On the
Yeah.
like just gag, keep it moving, keep it
Did you
insane.
ever read Groucho and Me?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that book came such as such a surprise to me because it reads almost like a rated R Marx Brothers film.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
like it's one of their movies, but there's stuff happening in it that's like
Yeah.
super edgy
Yeah.
and like and
Yeah.
crazy and dangerous. And then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, this was their life.
Yeah.
Like this is
And that
them.
got translated into the movies that you see. So yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's they're a big influence on those books. And the
So with that, like,
yeah,
do you have a preference between writing comics or screenplays? Like, is there one that you just kind of fall into
the
more
big preference
naturally?
I have is that comics get made.
Understood,
You know,
very
that's the
understandable.
like
Yeah,
I love writing screenplays. I always used to compare writing screenplays to assembling a Frankenstein monster. Because if you write spec screenplays, you've basically put a monster together, and then you pull the switch, which is maybe your agent if you have one, or you sending it out to producers, whatever, and you pull the switch
yeah.
and it doesn't get up off the table, and then 20 years later you got 30 dead bodies in your basement that are and I'm not one of those writers that doesn't love the work and that doesn't love doing the work, but also that doesn't love their own. I read my old scripts and I'm like, this is fucking great, and I can't believe no one made this movie.
It's crazy. Like, I don't think people quite understand how much stuff in Hollywood, like how much stuff in Hollywood actually gets greenlit, as in we're going to make this thing and then goes away
Yeah,
almost instantly.
yeah. The
Uh,
first one of my first jobs in Hollywood, well, not for, about 5 years after I moved out here, I was ghostwriting for Andy Sedaris,
oh, cool.
maker of low budget,
Yeah.
sexy spy movies, and I wrote 2 of his movies with him. And
Oh,
those
nice.
movies are largely my movies in terms of the writing, and I didn't get credit for them, and was a little bitter about that, but it was a deal I accepted at the time because I was 25. I was 25, and the movies got made. Like, I
Yeah.
was writing something, and then 3 months
And
later,
then you saw it.
yeah, 3 months later, I'm standing on the beach in Hawaii with Andy, going, "Yeah, bring in the helicopter." So like that's not. I didn't get to bring in the helicopter in film school.
Yeah.
So that was my experience. And then in the 90s, I tried getting stuff made through the studio system, and I would spend a year literally working on a project, doing free drafts for producers, for studio executives, and none of those movies got made. None of
Like,
them. And
from a comic nerd standpoint, I can't there are countless times just throughout my life that I remember being insanely excited about stuff like Walt Simonson doing conceptual art for the Green Lantern movie that was going to be made,
right,
or I think it was Chris Columbus that was making a 60s period piece Fantastic Four movie, and like
right.
just all these things that like they hyped up and then suddenly just stopped talking about,
On
and
the
then one
other
day you're
hand,
like, which one?
I was going to say, on the other hand,
Yeah.
I liked the John Carter movie.
Oh, John.
Every
Yeah,
other,
I
I,
love the movie.
I'm glad all of the directors that were assigned to that before it got made didn't get to make it. Like,
Oh, I see that. I don't know about. I don't
I
know
don't.
who else
Oh yeah,
was.
long before he was making blockbuster movies that were any good, John Favreau was attached to it. Robert
Oh,
Rodriguez was attached to it, and I think you were going to get Green Martians with 2 arms instead of 4.
yeah.
I'm glad they
I
waited till it could be good.
I love that movie, and it's still one of the biggest disappointments is the fact that Disney did not understand how to market it. Like,
Yeah,
starting with number one, like don't name it that.
Yeah. Well, I will say, this is not to get deep into the weeds on conspiracy theories, but there's a bit of a smoking gun in terms of Disney absolutely wanting the movie to fail and planning on it failing. And that is, it's the most obvious. If you think about failed blockbusters, what's the smoking ruin of a failed blockbuster? The toys no one bought. There were no toys.
Good point, especially for that movie. That movie, like,
If
should have been
Disney
like lousy with toys.
Yeah, if Disney intended John Carter to make money, and
Then
it
there would have
flopped,
been a ton of
you would have
solicitations
gone to
for.
Target and be able to buy your plush Woola your John Carter action figure, your flyer.
Holy
There
crap!
would have
I
been
did
a
not
sword,
even think
there would have
about that.
been a radium pistol, there would have been all that shit, and there was not one toy for a movie like that with those kind of props and those kind of images and those kind of things. And to me, it's like they just said, nope, this thing is not making a dime. If it kills us, this thing's not going to make a dime.
That sucks because I love that movie.
Yeah,
I thought it was great and would have been a fantastic franchise.
I don't know if you've plowed through my podcast, the Pulp Today podcast, but I had on Hector Navarro from Nerd.
Love Hector.
Hector's a great guy. I love Hector. And Hector, I have people on to talk, for people who don't know, I do this during the pandemic. I started this podcast called Pulp Today, and I read from a pulp novel and I talk about it. Nice. Either a little bit of the history of it or what it means to me or what I got out of it or whatever.
Oh, I'm going to have to put that in my feed, dude.
I started having guests on. I've had amazing guests. David Walker came on to talk about Don Goines. James Urbaniak, actor, who's a friend of mine, read a John Fonte chapter. I've had great people on. Magana Tova, do you know Magana? She was the pretty Russian girl who lives across the hall from Peter Parker in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man.
Oh, yes. I love her.
She's delightful. She's a really good friend of mine. And I ask people, like, what do you want to come on the show and read? Turns out she's a huge Ray Bradbury fan.
Oh, wow.
Was involved with Ray Bradbury Theater out here when Ray was still around. And there's an episode where I usually let the guest read the whole thing, but I said, the scene where Montag meets Clarissa is almost a radio play. It's mostly dialogue.
So you guys
do it, and I'll read Montag and you'll read Clarissa. And she was like, oh my God, I would love that. So we did that episode. But there's an episode called Hector Navarro, Warlord of Mars, where Hector reads a chapter from Princess of Mars, and we talked for an hour about that movie and what happened to it. And
oh my God, that's
the influence
fantastic.
of John Carter.
He's the person that when I start to go like into the weird recesses of my brain down like weird cartoon rabbit holes, we've never actually met, but I'll like jump on Twitter and then I'll like suddenly just jump to him and do you remember this?
Yeah. Hector's a really great guy. I've met him in person a few times at cons and things, and I could be wrong, but he used to have a podcast pre-Nerdist.
Yeah.
And that was my first appearance as a comic book writer on anything. Like he had me on, I don't even remember who made the connection, but he had me on his show. It was a 3-person panel, him and 2 women. I think Amy Dallin, Enthusi Amy, if you follow her on Twitter. Yeah. Amy was one of the other people on the show. Spacing on the third person's name, but they had me on as like a guest panelist to talk about my comics, and they asked me about things. Foreshadowing, they asked me who my favorite Ninja Turtle was, and this was before I was working with Kevin Eastman, so that was kind of funny.
Who is your favorite Ninja Turtle, by the way?
Sort of for a whole lot of reasons, Michelangelo.
Okay, nice.
It's my dad's actual full name, Michelangelo.
Oh, very nice.
He was Michelangelo Avallone. And a couple, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of reasons. I'm friends with an voice actor named Robbie Rist, and Rob voiced Michelangelo, I think, in the 80s, 90s cartoons. And I loved, I'm pleased with myself. I did predict that that's who the Last Ronin would be. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
When I picked up the first issue of the Last Ronin, I was like, for a million reasons, this has to be Mikey. Yeah, because it's not. There's no drama to Raphael becoming a grim warrior.
Yeah, it really like I feel like a lot of people were anticipating that when the first
Yeah,
solicitations came through,
yeah,
and I'm glad that they didn't
yeah.
do that.
It's the only
It's the only road
thing that's
you cannot do that. Like you just can't.
it's the only thing that's good writing is
Yeah.
making the happy-go-lucky one the saddest man in the world. You
Yeah.
know, like that's the part. And I Kevin's great and incredibly talented, and so is Tom Waltz. And I was like, I know this is going to be Mikey on the last page. It kind of has
Yeah.
to be. And
Yep.
also the fact, knowing the history, that Mikey, that the Ninja Turtle, he wasn't Mikey yet, really.
Yeah.
But the Ninja Turtle with the nunchucks is the first one that Kevin drew ever.
Oh,
That's
did
the
not know that.
napkin, the drawing on the napkin that he shows Peter Laird
Oh,
has
yeah.
nunchucks.
Oh,
So
nice.
Mickey,
It's so totally
Mikey was the
appropriate. Yeah.
first Ronin, so he's
So
the
he
last
should be
Ronin.
the last.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
So,
like
but yeah,
that.
that series was, I am now canonically a character in the Ninja Turtles universe, which makes me very happy. In issue 4, when they do the assault on Stockman's Island, there's a
Yeah.
briefing room scene, and he doesn't look like me, but there's one of the old commando generals with a white beard is referenced by Mikey as Commander Avallone.
Oh, nice.
And if you go to, I'm this much of an asshole. I went to the Turtles wiki, whatever the hell it's called.
Are you on there
I
now?
got a page. I got a, and
Yes,
I think
man.
it does even say now, like, probably a reference to Kevin Eastman's partner on Drawing Blood, David Avallone. So that's nice. Yeah, Kevin sent me that page. Sent me a screen grab, and thinking of you. I'm like, well, that's really nice. But
dude, that is awesome.
That's
like
amazing.
I'm sure in Star Trek, if
Right.
if somebody was friends with Gene Roddenberry, it's like, oh, you know what? I'll blow you out an airlock.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll throw a red shirt on you and you could die on an away mission.
Here, this is because it's just funny. This is the nerdiest piece of trivia I know. Nothing surpassed for sheer nerddom for me. I know Captain Kirk's serial number off the top of my friggin' head. SC937-0176 CEC.
Wow. Why? Why?
In the court martial episode, he says it. And when I was a kid, I used to cosplay in that costume, in that uniform.
So
and I thought Captain Kirk would know his serial number.
I gotta ask you. Okay, so you are a Trekkie.
Yeah.
Have you watched Strange New Worlds?
Oh,
yet?
I love it so much.
I fucking adore
this
TV show. It's all I've wanted for the past couple of years.
Exactly. I don't think I could love it more. Honestly.
So up until I've wanted to love Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy Discovery. I've watched every episode. And it's had its ups and it's had a lot of downs. But up until this last month, Lower Decks has been my favorite new Star Trek show. And now my new favorite, my favorite is Strange New Worlds. It's everything I want.
Well, ironically, it understands what makes Star Trek great. Even by the end, I don't know that even Roddenberry understood what made it great when he did Next Generation. Because there are a lot. Next Generation is great, has a million fans.
Yeah.
For me, an old school Shatner Trekkie, that ensemble never gelled for me the way the original one did.
But his whole I love Gene Roddenberry and I get where he was coming from, but going into that show and trying to tell your writers that you want to write a show where nobody has any conflict.
Yeah. Instead of figure out a way that good people, because good people have conflicts with one another.
Yes, exactly.
A lot of the worst TV writing, my least favorite form of TV writing, and you see this, it's on almost every show, where two people who could probably reasonably work something out have an irrational argument with one another because the writers want conflict.
Yeah.
And
And there's so many better ways that
yeah,
they could
there are
introduce
things for
drama.
good people to have conflicts about and
Yeah.
have arguments about. But I also just never you can't always keep doing this. But the way Kirk, Spock, and McCoy break down into ego, superego, and id is a perfect thing. And honestly,
I literally had a conversation yesterday with I was talking to Rachel Pollack, the Doom Patrol
yeah,
and yeah. So I was telling her about I'm writing a comic script right now, and I was having a lot of trouble at the like in those early couple months with it. And I ended up calling Elisa Whitney because it's it's kind of for younger generation, and the main character is a girl. So I was like, I'm not a 13-year-old girl,
right.
and I have no experience writing for 13-year-old girls. So can you kind of talk through this with me? And the best advice that she gave me, because there's like a core 3 character team in this book, and she was like, do you like Star Trek? And I was like, do I like Star Trek? She's like, figure out who's Kirk, who's Spock, and who's McCoy, and that, like, every time you have trouble like writing them in a scene,
Those
like
are the attitudes.
that might
Yeah,
push you through. And
yeah,
I swear to God, like, I was on fire.
yeah.
Like, it's crazy. Like, they
And
really are a great little.
there are other archetypes. I mean, I love. It might have been Kevin Smith, but whoever said about Guardians of the Galaxy, it's Star Wars, but everyone's Han Solo.
Yes,
All
yeah,
5 of them they're different kinds of Han Solo. They're all Han
yeah,
Solo, but they're different kinds of Han Solo.
oh yeah,
That works too, even,
yeah,
but it's clearly defining the character. I mean, it's why you base characters on people It's why you base them on actors. I mean, people said to me about Elvira, they said the same thing very kindly about Vincent Price, but it's the same deal. It's such an indelible character. It's
yeah,
not hard to imagine what Vincent Price, and I'm not talking about the guy who played in movies, on talk shows and in
oh
person.
yeah,
He was this lovely, gracious, a little bit kinky older
mm-hmm.
gentleman, this great Renaissance man and rock and tour. And
Oh yeah.
of
I
course,
could probably write a comic book starring Ruth Buzzy just
right.
based
There you
on
go.
Hollywood Squares.
Yeah. But that's the thing. It's like when the character is that indelible, and creating characters that indelible. One of the things I co-created with Eastman is called the Radically Rearranged Ronin Ragdolls. It is obviously a pastiche of the Ninja Turtles, but it's not their mentor is a old Japanese lady who runs a sushi restaurant, and that's not Splinter. Like, she's not a funny animal like Splinter. It's not.
Yeah.
It's a different set of things. And people say, well, who's Mikey? Who's Raphael? I'm like, they're not. They're what I went with, and it even comes partially from the names, is instead of Renaissance artists, we wanted to make it a little more Japanese centric.
Mm-hmm.
And they're growing up in the house of an elderly Japanese couple who exposed them to a lot of Japanese art and Japanese movies. So I
Okay.
thought, here are your 3 little girl kittens who, of course, can think and talk and do martial arts. They name themselves after anime directors.
Oh, love that.
And that is my rides here. And that gave me the characters. Actually, the names gave me the characters before I even had anything else, because
Oh.
the 3 characters I chose, the names I chose,
Mm-hmm.
were Tezuka, Miyazaki, and Otomo. If you know
Oh.
those directors, Otomo's the director of Akira.
Yeah.
Otomo is kind of the ragey, violent one.
See, I don't know. So I just know the names associated with them. I
Sure.
don't know what the people. I mean, other than Miyazaki, like, just
Right.
I've
But
seen so many interviews.
it's not so much about Miyazaki's
Oh, it's more about like the tone
personality.
of
It's
like
about what are
the
his
work that.
movies like.
Gotcha. Okay.
So Miyazaki is the gentle, soulful poet.
Okay.
Suzuka, who created Astro Boy, is
Yeah.
kind of the optimistic leader, and Otomo is the moody, violent one.
Oh,
And
I love
they're not
this.
exactly ego, superego, and like the way that Miyazaki is more soulful. It's not a superego.
It's not a 1-to-1, but like
Yeah, it's
you can
about
kind of
it's more about one is Otomo is body, Tezuka is brain,
and then
and
Miyazaki's
Miyazaki
heart.
soul. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's it again. So writing a scene where it's id, ego, super ego, really easy to write a scene.
Yeah.
Brain,
So
heart,
it
soul,
really is all about figuring
body.
out like
Yeah. What is
who is your character when they walk in this, like, no
yeah,
matter what scene you're writing, it's like your character walks in this room, who are they?
yeah,
So that when whoever's in that room approaches them, how are they going to react
yeah.
to
And
whatever they say to them?
you can switch it up and you can have people do surprising things, but you have to know deep down why they did them and have it not be a violation of who they are. And going
Yeah.
back to Star Trek,
I kind of feel like Discovery didn't, not even just Discovery. I feel like a lot of the writing on the Star Trek shows, aside from Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds, I feel like there's been a lot of instances of, okay, we've established who these characters are, but now that doesn't fit for what we want them to
yeah,
do
there's a little
coming
like
up.
that. Yeah.
So we're gonna have to like throw this thing in front of them so that we
Yeah.
can, crank their personality just enough so it doesn't seem crazy that they're gonna do
Yeah.
this thing here.
No,
And
perfect example, Michael and her boyfriend in the last season. It's like I don't believe him
no,
doing any of that.
not at all.
I don't
Like
believe
it was
I really enjoyed the season.
it,
One of my favorite things about midway through the second to last episode, I turned to my wife and I said, "It's Star Trek the motion picture, and they don't want us to notice." V'ger is headed for Earth, man.
yeah.
And what we got to do is figure out how to tell V'ger that we're cool and not to eat us.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I dig that. I'm like, one of my favorite things about Lower Decks actually is that it's sort of like how Favreau is obsessed with the Christmas special and with the toy lines.
Yeah.
Whoever created Lower Decks, that dude loves Star Trek the motion picture and he loves the animated series.
Oh yeah.
Love it when the Cerritos goes to warp. It does the rainbow colors that the Enterprise does in Star Trek the motion picture.
Yep.
I love all the references to the animated series and going,
And
no, man, that's fucking canon. That's
all the weird little creatures that have never popped up except for in those shows.
Yeah, that we've never seen a Zinti on regular Star Trek, but we've seen them on the animated show. I want a Zinti, goddammit. Give me Zintis on everything. And the doctor is the same race that the communications officer
was.
Yeah.
I feel like Lower Decks and very clearly Strange New Worlds, the writer's room is filled with people that love Star Trek.
Yeah.
And I feel like the other writers' rooms on the other shows are filled with good writers who don't all necessarily.
I think they've also been given a different mission, though. I think Discovery and the other current spinoff.
There was Discovery, there was Picard, there was
Discovery and Picard. The what they were told was, we want 2020, circa 2020 peak TV. We want serialized, ultra adult, and
damn the science.
That's not Star Trek. Star Trek is an episodic show about a ship that goes from planet to planet. And I like them having the improvement. How they've improved on original Star Trek is that if they were making original Star Trek now, the way they're making Strange New Worlds, the week after City on the Edge of Forever, Captain Kirk would still be depressed and in a bad mood.
Yeah.
That's the only thing about the old format that I didn't like. Is like, that's weird. Just last week, the worst experience of his life happened to this guy, and he's giggling on the bridge in the first scene of this
Yeah.
episode. Like
Uh,
he should still be a little down for 2-3 episodes. You know?
there was so much stuff. Like, so my wife, we rewatch rewatch TNG a lot. Like,
Mm,
it's one of those comfort things where it's like,
sure.
oh, let's, watch this episode. There is so much trauma, like, invited
Oh
on,
yeah,
like, all of those bridge crew members
yeah.
that the next day, Geordi
Oh yeah,
is like taken prisoner.
yeah,
Not even Captain Picard.
yeah.
The four lights,
Oh
and
yeah, he's
then
tortured many times.
right back to work.
Yeah, yeah. No,
It's
and the thing that I will say about Next Generation that bunch of the old episodes are unwatchable to me, and the
yeah.
TOS is comfort food for me. But the worst thing that ever happened to television writing was the B story.
Oh God. Have you
The whole like some major world changing thing has happened on the planet, and Geordi is having trouble getting a date.
Yeah.
And Data has a cat now. Like, fuck that, dude. Can we get back to the galaxy changing stuff on the planet? I don't give a shit about Data's cat.
Did you follow the Twitter account? Was it Star Trek The Next Generation season 8 or something?
No.
It's
Riker Googling is pretty great. I don't know if you follow Riker Googling.
No.
Follow Riker. It is a hilarious account.
Oh, okay.
It is hilarious. I'm trying to think of a good joke.
Who's the showrunner of Lower Decks?
I don't know the name off the top of my head.
I think it's Matt something. Years ago, he started a Twitter account called I think it's called it was like Star Trek TNG season 8, and all it was, every tweet was a description of the episode, and it was exactly that. It was like, the Enterprise is going through the Gamma Quadrant, and they come across a strange anomaly, and they have to figure out why it's causing everybody to get violent. And Dr. Crusher is suddenly in love with, her potpourri stick.
Yeah, with a houseplant. Yeah. No,
yeah.
Yeah. So Riker Googling, here are some examples of recent ones. Do Samsung starships explode more? Which millennium are millennials from? Vulcan nerve pinch YouTube tutorial. Which gods are real?
Oh no.
Is Wash really dead? What was crypto? Is the upside down the same as the mirror universe?
Oh my God.
Every one of them are lightsabers possible. Hello Kitty species. Starship computer voice erotic fanfic. Red alert won't turn off.
Oh
anyway,
no.
Just follow Riker Googling.
Riker
I don't know. I have no idea who. I don't know how often they tweet, but every once in a while, one of them will show up in my timeline, and they're always like Klingon prophylactics.
Oh
it's always like some kind of good Star Trek joke. But yeah, the B story thing. They forgot on TNG. They just so often they're just not good. And the writers, the incredible sexism of like, Deanna Troi has a story. Someone wants to bang her. That's the story. Or Deanna Troi's story
and she'll talk about it while she's jazzercising.
Yeah. And the same with Dr. Crusher. Dr. Crusher falls in love with blank.
Well, I feel like Discovery, or at least in this last season, became like emotion porn.
Yeah.
Instead of any type of like mission or anything, or even like having any sense of urgency that the universe may be destroyed.
Yeah.
I want to go in this room with you right now and talk about why what you just said didn't validate what I was just feeling, and a lot of like whisper talking, and
no, they leaned a bit too much into that, and there's a part of me that even on original Star Trek, there's a part of me that goes, you you realize you're in a military organization, right? You
Yeah.
can't don't talk to people like that. And also, I felt like they really missed a trick with the non-binary character by making any kind of a deal out of it. I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, I kind of feel like
It,
by the
they
20 these people are from the 23rd century, and it's like when the non-binary character was sort of talking to Stamets and he was making about like I accept you, I love you, it was like that
yeah.
shouldn't even be a conversation in the
It
23rd century,
exactly.
should it? Like, who gives a
Like
shit? Like,
it felt incredibly heavy-handed
yeah.
for
I
what
mean,
that
I
show is supposed to be.
I think they're doing the Lord's work, and I
I
appreciate them
yeah.
doing that kind of representation. But part of me is like, no, there's that great quote. I heard and Patrick Stewart told the story, and I loved it. He said something to Roddenberry about like, I'm kind of surprised do you want me to wear a hairpiece or something? I'm kind of
Yeah.
surprised you hired a bald man for this part. He's like, I would think that by the 23rd century they would be able to fix baldness. And Roddenberry said, why would they care in the 23rd century? Why would
Yeah.
anyone in the 23rd century waste a minute of their life making
Yeah.
themselves have hair that they didn't have? He's like,
Yeah.
if we're not past that by the 23rd century,
We're in trouble.
there's no federation. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, I enjoy. I'm not. It takes a lot to push me out of something that
Yeah.
I like. I will I will watch mediocre Star Trek way before I will watch, and and Discovery for all of its story problems, it's still exceedingly well done.
I still
You know,
like I still was excited every single
yeah,
week that a new
yeah,
episode was on.
yeah. Still,
It
it's the
but I
worst of it, and there's a part of there. Sometimes I go like, there are eight Star Trek shows on currently, like,
and that's why as upset as I get about all of this stuff, in the end, I'm like, I just keep making it though, because I now have a choice of like exactly like 8 different Star Trek
yeah,
things to watch.
yeah,
So yes, just keep making more, because the more you make, obviously I'm going to get one
yeah,
that I adore
and
and then
also
another one that like makes me happy.
it's like Star Trek Prodigy. I am not the target audience for that. That is
Yeah.
aimed at a lower audience. I love it.
I
It's great. I enjoy the hell out of it.
by episode 2 that I was like, "Oh, yeah, this one's not for me."
Yeah,
So I don't watch it.
I watched it and I enjoyed it. I like seeing Janeway. I like all the Easter eggs on that.
Yeah.
But no, for me, like Supergirl was a very well done show, very well written, and 3 episodes. This is a CW show for teenage girls, and God bless them. Let them have Supergirl. Supergirl
Yeah.
should be theirs, actually.
Yeah.
Supergirl is 100% for them. And
I watched the
I'm good with
first
that.
2 seasons because I was happy that there was a
Oh,
Supergirl. I was
it
happy that
scratches
there
the
was a
Superman itch really well,
I was happy that there was a DC show where they were like, here's your hero, here's their costume, and
Yeah,
here's all their weird, crazy villains. I was
yeah,
like, keep doing that,
yep.
because they really are very scared of that most of the time.
Yeah, no, I enjoy the Superman and Lois show very much, but I hate how it completely forgets the entire DC universe.
Yeah,
Every once in
that's
a while there'll
that.
be a crisis, and I'm like, you don't want to call the Martian Manhunter in to give you a hand with this?
I
Wonder
kind of
Woman, pick up the phone. Wonder Woman will be here
I stopped
tomorrow.
watching it
I,
because of that.
I swear
I
to God, yeah. No, I love the actors playing Superman and Lois a lot.
Yeah, they're
I think
fantastic.
they're
I
so
just
good.
it upsets me when Warner Brothers is like, here's a show about that thing you love, but we're gonna scoop out some of the things that you love about it, and we're just gonna make up
Yeah.
some new random stuff because
Someone,
why not?
yeah, someone did point out to me once, and I thought this was a good historical point to make. The
Mhm.
Marvel characters were designed to be in the same universe.
Okay.
The DC characters were never designed to be in the same universe.
That I'm okay with, but
That came way
the
later.
the thing that I'm not like, the thing I was really excited about for Superman and Lois was when they were like, oh, like it's Superman and Lois, they're married and they have, kids. And I was like,
Yeah.
kids? Like I at first it sounded like it was going to be Superman and Lois and Super Sons,
Right.
which is still honestly one of my favorite things that DC has ever done.
Yeah.
Like Jonathan Kent and Damian Wayne in a
Yeah.
comic book series was
Yeah.
it was like effervescent.
Yeah.
And they could have done that. I feel like it would
Yeah.
have been
No,
like
that's
a home run.
DC has constantly made the mistake of not, and it's the mistake Feige didn't make, honestly, of like
Yeah.
not learning anything from the best comics and what made it great. Though honestly, the funniest thing to me about the Marvel stuff is I don't like very much most of the comics that they have made the movies out of. I didn't like Civil War. Like,
Oh yeah, neither did
I didn't
I. But
originally like
then again, they
Civil War.
didn't really make Civil War.
No, they didn't.
They
And
just
that's
used the name.
I love Brubaker. I didn't find the Winter Soldier arc compelling or interesting at all in the comic.
Yeah.
The movie's fantastic.
Yeah.
Like it's that funny thing of like when you do a remake, you do a remake of the weak thing that was bad, not of the
Yeah.
great thing. So it's funny that we haven't adapted like the Kree Skrull War or Galactus or a bunch of the other
Yeah.
stuff that's really great. We've adapted the stuff that is not that great.
See, but I kind of feel like it's the whole necessity is the mother of invention, because because Warner Brothers has been like, they just have their glut. Like they literally have a stable of the most iconic superheroes ever created, and they could do whatever they want. Whereas Marvel, when Kevin Feige kind of like took this on, he's like, oh, this is what I have to work with.
Right.
I guess I'll work with this stuff.
But I've always said that's a huge blessing in disguise.
Oh yeah, completely.
If he had to launch the MCU with the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man and the X-Men, I always tell people, like, imagine Endgame, but every actor who has ever lived is in it.
Yeah.
Like literally, like imagine 30 more movie stars having to fit in that film, which already has more movie stars than any film ever made, except maybe The Longest Day.
I'm crossing my fingers that he does get the rest of his stable though. Like
well, again, the great thing is Captain America's and Iron Man are gone. Like that's the other really smart thing. Is like, this story was the Captain America and Iron Man and Thanos story,
and we finished that. Yeah.
And now it's new people, and now it's
we have She-Hulk, which is insane to me. I cannot wait for that.
It kind of feels like a sitcom, and I think that's fucking great. That's what you should do with She-Hulk.
It's LA Law. It's LA Law in the MCU. Yeah.
No, and I'm not the first. Plenty of people have made this point, but the genius of the MCU has always been that they're not all. Very few of them are superhero movies.
Yeah.
Captain America, the First Avenger, is a World War II movie.
Yep.
Winter Soldier is a 1970s political thriller with superhero. Well, they all have superhero elements, obviously, but Ant-Man's a heist movie, a heist comedy, really.
Yeah.
An Ocean's 11 kind of a movie, really. And that's the, and again, so you're handed She-Hulk and you go, well, this is comedy drama about lawyers. It's not, the universe isn't going to be at stake here. That's not what's going to happen.
It's like, do you ever watch Ally McBeal? What if she was green and really strong?
But it was always my favorite thing about the Marvel universe, the awareness the characters have of each other, that every time Spider-Man would come up against something really fearsome, he would go, this seems like a Fantastic Four kind of a thing. Like, why am I? Should Doctor Strange? I think Doctor Strange, because this is some sort of monster. Like, I'm not a monster guy.
Those were always some of my favorite things. Like him and Johnny Storm, like just kind of making their way across the city, but at the same time, like, jabbing each other in the ribs and, making fun of each other. Like that's, and Kevin Feige's not afraid of that. Yeah.
And not afraid, and the thing, they don't do it as well as they should sometimes, but he's done a pretty good job of keeping the world building consistent in the science fiction, in that there should never be a scene in an MCU movie where anyone, particularly a superhero, is just absolutely amazed by a thing they're seeing. That's like a robot, or, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
New York got invaded by an alien army with flying snake creatures and whatever. Like, with all the shit that's been on the evening news, like, you would think that most civilians in the Marvel universe would see, you know, whatever event happening, you know, oh, look, flying guy with lasers in his eyes. Okay, what's for dinner? You know, like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, let's go check out Twitter and see who this flying guy with the laser eyes is. Oh, he's one of the Eternals. Okay, cool. You
Well,
know,
I think that's the brilliance that we're gonna get. Like, he's really leaning into that, I think,
yeah,
with like Miss Marvel.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
watching that trailer is, I think that show is going to give us, this is what it's like kind of on the ground
yeah,
floor
ground
for
level.
everybody that's not super. And
Yeah,
then oh, and PS, well, now one of these people is going to be super.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But that show looks great too. Yeah,
Yeah, I can't. I know I'm not the demographic, but I think I'm going to like
oh yeah,
fucking love it.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That is definitely one of those things. I'm not the demo, and I'll probably watch every episode and adore it. But
yeah,
yeah, no, it's the whole MCU project is a master class in building a machine like that. And it's like the construction of the original Marvel universe. It's, you know, it's
yeah.
the way in which it interconnects that makes for the interesting part. You know, I loved in the first season of Daredevil, time has moved on since the 80s. So how explain that Hell's Kitchen, which is now like the most shishi part of Manhattan, needs Daredevil? And the fact that in the first episode or so, someone says, well, the Chitauri invasion, like so many houses
destroyed it
down here. And it's like, oh, right. The Chitauri destroyed the wine bars, you know, and the expensive lofts, and
that was like right off the bat. It's like, okay, now it put everybody at ease immediately, so that you could like kind of just enjoy the show, which I loved. Yeah.
But that idea of like, yeah, no, this is a thing that happened. And the blip is one of those things. It's like, you should be doing stories about PTSD about the blip forever, because that would never go away.
And the thing is, I'm never upset or complaining that DC's film and TV shows don't connect enough. The thing that upsets me about like DC's live action productions, because their animation has always been brilliant, but their live action productions for some reason are terrified of the source material. They're terrified of the superhero source material.
Since Christopher Reeve hung up his cape, they have stayed away. They have been terrified of making it look like it looked in the comics and making it feel like it felt in the comics. And
the fact that every Batman or Bat-related TV show tries to stay as far away from any costumes as possible, and if they have to, it's just very minimal. Like, they have this whole new Gotham Knights TV show, which they announced the other day, and then they I don't know if you saw on Twitter, like they show this photo, and it's like 5 good-looking teenagers in different types of outfits, like walking down a dark street, and I was like, and it says Gotham Knights. Just cut that Gotham Knights off, and that show could be like, it's 21. It's Mission Impossible High School. It's Power Rangers Detroit.
No,
it could be anything.
I tried to watch Gotham, and I think 3 episodes in, my wife said, "Are we going to stop hate watching this at some point?" And I said,
I watched 1 episode.
Now would be good.
Yeah, I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I would say the best DC product for adults on movies, television in the past, since Christopher Reeve, is the Harley Quinn sitcom.
Oh my god, the cartoon.
The cartoon
is fan-fucking-tastic.
It connects the dots I mean, one of my favorite, possibly my favorite comic book character is Darkseid, and I judge people by how they read. And the dark side in the Snyder movies is just Darth Vader. Like, there's nothing interesting. He's less interesting than Darth Vader. And Jack Kirby's dark side is a chatty, poetic weirdo.
Yeah.
And on Harley Quinn, they absolutely fucking wrote him as a chatty, poetic weirdo. And it's Michael Ironside who does the voice amazingly well. But one of my favorite things in all comics, just because it's so, when Scott and Big Barda get married at the end of Mr. Miracle 18, Jack Kirby, Darkseid shows up. And everybody has gone away except Shiloh and Oberon.
Yeah.
The young boy and the little person. And Darkseid shows up and looks around and basically says, "Oh, I missed the wedding." Like they were going to stick around for Darkseid to show up as their wedding guest, the evil overlord of the universe. And he says, Shiloh says, "Man, that guy's face or that guy's eyes could stop a storm." And Darkseid said, "I am the storm," because he's Darkseid. And he says, "The ceremony was brief but full of emotion, but life at best is bittersweet." What are you talking about? Like that your villain shows up, says something a little bit poetic about having missed your wedding, and that's the end of the series. I like Glorious Godfrey. You're a revelator, pleased with the sound of his own voice, but I am the revelation, the tiger heart at the center of all things. When you cry out in your sleep, it's Darkseid that you saw. Like almost from memory correct, but that's some crazy shit.
I love that Tom King kind of brings that back in the Mr. Miracle in the scene with the cookies when they're just Darkseid's sitting on like a little chair but that's the thing,
you should always do that shit with Darkseid.
Yeah,
Darkseid should always be the guy sitting in your living room eating from the crudité plate.
You have to see the contrast of it.
Yeah, what Darkseid called the cosmic comedy. What he refers to as the cosmic comedy. Yeah, for a long time they finally got reprinted. My favorite lost, for want of a better word, comics. The Jerry Conway told me it was his doing. They restarted the Kirby stuff a few years after Kirby left. DC. Jerry wrote The Return of the New Gods. Don Newton drew it. It was really good. It's really good. It wasn't Jack Kirby, but it was Jerry Conway's a great writer. It was really good.
Yeah.
Mr. Miracle was continued first by Englehart and Rogers, and then by Steve Gerber and Michael Golden. Those comics are amazingly good.
I don't think I ever read them.
And they just there's a hardcover. It's a little pricey, but there's a hardcover, and it's got too much stuff in it that's not that, but it has it's called like this. I think it's even called like the Steve Englehart, Steve Gerber, Mr. Miracles. And even Kurt Busiek, who's a writer, was like, "So why is it Englehart and Gerber and not Marshall Rogers and Michael Golden? You don't want to sell those guys?"
Well, see, I think that's so something else that Warner Brothers is scared of is trying to do like the Guardians of the Galaxy or Iron Man. They're scared to do any of the stuff that's not their big three. And I think like $1 billion franchise for them right now is doing a movie about Scott Free, like being born on like this fucking like hellscape of a planet
and
escaping. And then
King.
And then sequel to that, giving us a movie about Big Barda, this woman who's like, the pinnacle of everybody on this planet, and her breaking away from that, and like this, like that love story right there, like that is a fucking $1 billion franchise.
Yeah, they're two. Yeah. And the thing is, the Steve Gerber, where he was taking Mr. Miracle. If I ever meet Tom King, I would have to ask him if he read those issues, because
Yeah.
Mr. Miracle has this in a Steve Gerber issue. He goes to assassinate Darkseid, and Darkseid literally Omega beams him and he vanishes. And he's in this dimension with a character called Ethos, because we're very subtle in comic books. And Ethos basically makes him realize that the war between Apocalypse and New Genesis is kind of a fraud, and you can't win it by winning it. You have to see past the war and overcome it. And Scott basically tries to turn himself into a religious figure on Earth to be an alternative to Darkseid. That what the people of Apocalypse need, they'll never, to a certain degree, it's like Putin's Russia. Everyone's lying to them. They think they need Darkseid. They actually love Darkseid. He oppresses them. He kills them. He sets fire to them. They work for him 24/7, but they love him. And you can't actually make the Russian Revolution happen on Apocalypse. He tries, he fails, he gets a lot of people killed. So Scott goes, no, we need a god that's not New Genesis and not Apocalypse, and it's going to be me, and I'm going to solve this problem. And Gerber it got canceled very quickly, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And we'll never know what Gerber was going to do with that. But Tom King's take seemed very much like it was coming out of that tradition.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he
had read,
if he hadn't read that.
But yeah, it is wild to me. We were watching. I actually finally sat down and watched like the first 90 minutes of The Batman last night, and I'm enjoying it so far. And
it's a good movie, but
I'm not the world's. I maybe shouldn't say that in public anymore, but I'm not the world's biggest fan of Batman. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why we're off air. But
I love Batman, and I did enjoy that movie. I just enjoyed it more when Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman, and David Fincher made it.
Here's the thing that it made me think about, though, looking at how they rendered the city and all that.
Yeah.
That these characters were invented in different times.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think if you're going to go and make a James Bond movie, the smart thing to do is what the Man from U.N.C.L.E. franchise tried to do. Make your James Bond movie in 1964. Watching The Batman and looking at the cars and I was like, this movie should just simply take place in 1975.
Which would be great.
It really doesn't. It takes place in the current day because of the iPhones and the whatever.
Yeah.
But that's not what everything else in the production, aside from the iPhones and the HD TVs, everything else is telling me it's 1974.
So my hot take, by the way, is that Joel Schumacher made for the time, it wouldn't have been billions, but he made $1 million franchise with his Bat movies. The mistake he made was with the production design, because the films that he made he essentially made big budget Adam West Batman films.
He sure did.
And if he had, instead of the nipple suits, if he had put Clooney in the Lycra and used all the same sets, and he already had the Dutch angles and everything, and he had like the script, everything was 66 Batman to a T except for the production design. And if he had just used all of that, everybody would have watched those movies and like just fallen in love with them. But instead, he gave us weird,
dark and gritty Batman 66 does not work.
Yeah, it just didn't work. But like, imagine it through those eyes, and you're like, oh my god, this is like really fun. So yes, that exactly.
I'm the last guy in the world. The one of the dumbest to me nerd opinions in the world is the whole "you ruined my childhood." I mean, when Crystal Skull came out, I was like, Steven Spielberg's been making mediocre Indiana Jones movies since 1985. Man, this is not like a new thing that just happened for the first time.
Yeah,
go back and watch Temple of Doom again. Not very good. And by the way, I loved it when it came out, and I loved it
I mean,
unironically. You know,
it's all pulpy action films.
yeah,
Like they're not supposed to be great.
yeah.
Like Crystal Skull was just,
Well,
I
there's
mean,
also
that's the whole,
the LaBouffe of it all is,
yeah.
they never make
But
that mistake.
but it didn't
Don't trust
ruin
anyone
my childhood.
yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
my joke about that it's ruining my childhood thing. I always say, I don't know. My wife is pretty disappointed. We were promised that Chris Pine was coming to our house in 2006 to pulp those Shatner DVDs personally, and he never showed up to destroy my childhood.
Yeah.
I thought Zach Quinto was going to tear up all my Spock posters or whatever,
Yep.
but nope, it's all still here. Strangely enough, it all survived.
I
When I saw Man of
watched,
Steel, I saw Man of Steel at the ArcLight in Hollywood.
yeah.
Across the street from it used to be this giant mega media store called Amoeba Records.
Oh yeah, it's my favorite
Literally,
record store in the entire universe, and I'm super sad that it's gone.
the one in LA is gone. Yeah. I walked across the street. Oh, actually, they moved it to Hollywood Boulevard. It does
Yeah, but I mean the one that I
but the
loved is
mega
gone.
store. Yeah.
Yeah.
I literally walked out of Man of Steel, walked across the street, bought the Blu-ray of 1978 Christopher Reeve, and no one was harmed. Like it's fine.
I watched the Lorne Michaels Ghostbusters film.
Mm-hmm.
I took my son to see. I forgot how old he was. He was pretty young, but I was like, "Oh, new Ghostbusters film, full of like comedians that I love." I was like, Kristen Wiig can't fail,
Right.
and we sat in that movie, and I was like, "Oh, all right." I mean,
No,
it
it
wasn't
great.
like it
I
wasn't
enjoyed it.
great, but I didn't like it. Just wasn't great, but he at that time, I think he was like maybe 7 or 8 years old. No, he was like 8 or 9 years old. He watched this thing. We got out. I was like, "What did you think?" He was like, "That was the coolest movie I've ever seen." I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that was a pretty cool movie, I
Well,
guess."
and the thing is, some of this stuff that gets like so many things that are classics now, times change.
Yeah.
Anyone under the age of 40 will not believe you if you tell them what everybody thought of Blade Runner in 1981. They won't believe it. I liked it. I thought it was really cool to look at, but we were sold a trailer of the next Harrison Ford action movie after Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Empire Strikes Back, and oh boy, is that not what we got. And go ahead.
one of my favorite I mean, it's not really a quote because I don't remember exactly what he said, but the showrunner of the Netflix Voltron Legendary Defender television show, when that show came out, somebody was talking to him and they were like, "Okay, so how did you approach making this show?" And he said, "I made sure that we made the show that everybody remembers, not the show that actually exists."
That's great.
Because that show is awful.
Yeah.
And when we're like, children have bad taste.
Yeah. That is such a great point.
It's
that's sort of, well, I think, I've done a lot of licensed work. When you approach any license, sometimes I've had a lot of creative control. Sometimes I haven't. In terms of like what I could do with it. But to me, it's always like, what works the best? Why was this good? And what is worth changing, commenting on, having an opinion about?
What's worth keeping? Like what's the thing that grabbed everybody?
Yeah. What can we shed because time has moved on? And what can we that's to go back with where we started this conversation. Strange New Worlds absolutely looks at the original series and goes, here's all the good stuff.
Yeah.
Here's all the things that made Star Trek really great. So far, we've seen, I'm trying to remember how the third episode. Yeah, 3 episodes now have ended without violence being the solution.
Yeah. But the other brilliant thing is we are getting a new adventure every week.
Yep.
But it's also still serialized because there is the underlying thread of what Pike is having to deal with
And
from
making
Discovery.
that choice on Discovery, I got to say, to find a way to make Christopher Pike even more mind-blowingly heroic and
Yeah, man.
admirable, that is a
Yeah.
hell of a thing to pull off. That he knows he's about to get
He
burned.
knows his fate.
Yeah, he knows his fate. He knows he knows the lives he's going to save, and he's just going to charge headlong into
That
it.
was an
Great
amazing
writing.
moment when he actually looks up
Mhm.
all the names, and they're all children right now.
Yeah.
Because like until he did that, like it's like, oh, this is 10 years before Kirk.
Right.
But as soon as he did that, you're like, oh, he's got like a ways to go to like live with this.
Yeah.
That's like crazy.
Yeah.
God, I love that show.
They also cast friend is too strong a word, but my beloved acquaintance Winona Earp as his girlfriend in the first episode.
Oh yeah.
I have a thing about casting that I'm obsessed with, that certain people in the universe, you have to cast people that have the power that character would have. And if his girlfriend is going to be another starship captain, it has to be someone who could be the star of their own television show where they play a starship captain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You can't just be like, hey, you wanna be in a Star Trek show?
Someone can, and it's the same thing in the Batman. The guy's playing the mayor who gets killed,
Yeah.
and the police commissioner who gets killed.
Mhm.
They're nobody. They're not movie stars. They're not. And then you get a Skarsgård, so good that he's important.
Yeah.
But like, I used to have this opinion about, like, movies used to always, when they would cast someone to say, if the president of the United States is in like one scene, they would just cast the most anonymous looking white guy they could find. And I would go like, no, but in the world, no one in the world doesn't recognize the president of the United States when you see him.
Yeah.
So
like
when
making them a nobody.
When you see the president of the United States in a movie, you should go, oh, it's the president of the United States. It's a guy, I know that face. I've seen that face 1,000 times.
Comedies are never afraid to like actually like find somebody that should be in that role.
Yeah.
Like I mean, weird shift, but we just watched The Lost City with
I haven't
Sandra
seen
Bullock.
that yet.
It's actually really, I mean, it's
It
Romancing the Stone
with Sandra Bullock, and I would go see that movie in a heartbeat.
That's exactly what it is,
Yeah.
and it's exactly what you want it to be, and it's a lot of fun.
Great. Yeah, I've been thinking about watching it.
Daniel Radcliffe is in it, and he's being Daniel Radcliffe because he's like, I don't have to worry about anything, so I could just do whatever I want.
Right.
But you have there's a character that they cast somebody in a big role, they cast somebody in a big role who, if it was their own movie, would be a much bigger role, but he's like he plays second banana, and it's brilliant that they did that. Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I always say. The other starship captain's got to be a movie star.
Yeah.
Or I don't believe he's the captain. I don't believe he's charismatic and leader, and you need to sell me on all of that stuff. And it's always better to me when the supporting characters are like, oh, that person is going off. Melanie Scrofano is going off to her own Star Trek spinoff that we'll never see, where she's the captain of some of the USS Intrepid or whatever. And I'm sure that's a fine show too,
But the weird possibility is that might happen because Handsome Mount came into Discovery just to like be like, hey, how's everybody doing? And now we have this show.
But it was a perfect example. Captain Pike can't show up and not be a star.
Yeah.
Captain fucking Pike, and it's Bruce Greenwood in the movie.
I was going to say, even in that movie,
an incredibly talented
bit we get from him.
Yeah.
I was a little upset that they gave him just a plain old wheelchair at the end. I was like, come on, guys. Put him in the iron lung.
But that was an old, I always tell the story, but there was an episode of 24, which I did watch. It wasn't good, but I watched it. And I hadn't seen the opening credits, so I didn't know who the guest stars were. and there was a scene where Jack Bauer's in a car saying, "We're going to see the man who taught me how to be a secret agent, the man who taught me everything I know." And we get there, and I'm like, I need a James Bond or better in that room.
Yeah.
Like, this had better fucking not be some, under fiver character actor. And they open the door, and it's Peter Weller, and I went, cool. There
Ooh,
it is.
nice.
I got a Batman / RoboCop / Buckaroo Banzai. That's it.
Yeah.
But I was like, there's got to be a superhero behind that door, or we don't believe anything you just told me.
I still lament over The Rock not being a legit sequel to Sean Connery's James Bond. And not actually. What's that?
Let me tell you a funny story about that. Because this is a story about ideas and how they're worth nothing.
Yeah.
I say that as someone who gets paid to have ideas, but there are only so many ideas in the world.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, 79, 80, after Bernard Lee died, the guy who played M, I sat down and wrote a James Bond fan fiction movie script, which was kicked off by M being assassinated.
Ooh.
And Bond deciding, but I was Connery's Bond very clearly.
Okay.
Out of retirement to find out who killed M. Turns out it's one of Blofeld's doubles from Diamonds Are Forever. It's a whole thing.
Okay.
But Spectre has bought Alcatraz Island and put its base there. And the last act of the movie was white bearded James Bond leading a commando raid of American Marines on Alcatraz. That was the third act of the movie.
What?
Guess what happened next? Blofeld gets away in a Zeppelin, a blimp, and Bond runs after and grabs the tow line and climbs up it to the gondola, and they have their final fight in San Francisco Bay in the gondola of a blimp. Sound familiar? That's the end of A View to a Kill.
Yes.
Now, the broccolis were not in my bedroom. They were not tapping my phones.
But what did you do with your fan fiction?
It's in a notebook somewhere in this apartment. I've never.
Oh, weird.
No one has ever seen it. But when I saw the trailer for The Rock, I just kind of giggled and went, that was a good idea for a movie, right?
It really was a good idea.
You know what was a great idea for a movie? James Bond assaulting Alcatraz with some U.S. Marines. That was a fucking awesome idea for a movie. And I remember on this day, it wasn't like it was a huge moment for me, but I was reading like Starlog or Cinefantastique or one of those magazines, Cinema Scene.
Yeah.
And I turned the page and it's James Bond hanging off the gondola in San Francisco Bay. And I just went, someone filmed that scene I wrote when I was 14 or 15. Neat. But, that's, and I will say,
I mean, that's, okay. I will, I guess we should wrap up soon, but I will follow that with, so I told you I'm currently writing a graphic novel, but before this, I did actually write my own comic. I only made it 2 issues. There's my main protagonist, the advertisement for it. But so I debuted it at 2011 New York Comic Con. I had a crap ton of copies of this thing. I've got the artist with me and like our whole team, and we're signing comics, we're doing interviews, and in between being at the booth, I'm spending my entire time like racing around the convention floor trying to get my comic book in the hands of all of the comic people in the industry that I love.
Right.
I was like, I found Blair Butler, and I was like, oh my God, please take this. I found at the time Axel Alonso was doing his thing, so I gave him one. And then the big one for me was I snuck into Robert Kirkman was doing a panel with Jimmy Palmiotti and a bunch of people, and I waited till the end, and then I went up to Robert Kirkman. I was like, hey man, like at that particular time he was a massive influence, and I was like, I just wanted you to like have this, and this I made this because you kind of helped this along. And I know he ended up hanging out at some point. I saw he was with like Eric Kripke and like a bunch of other people. Cut to a couple of years later, and there's Eric Kripke makes this TV show that somebody called me up when they watched this commercial, and they
Mhm.
were like, "Hey man, you should watch this commercial." And I watched this commercial. I'm like, "Fuck!" I'm like, "It's kind of similar." I'm like, "It can't be." But like that's the nature of all this. It's like maybe he did see it, maybe he didn't. Maybe just the fact that I like was spreading it everywhere, like the idea just ended up in the ether or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
But it's one of those things where more often than not it's like, oh, I had that idea. And
yeah,
you could always possibly trace it, possibly not. Yours, on the other hand, is freaky.
yeah. But I tell you, it's only because all screenwriters learn the same lessons from the movies we love. If you love Hitchcock
Yeah,
and you're writing a thriller, a spy thriller, you go, what national monument, what interesting physical location
yeah,
hasn't had an action scene on it?
yeah,
And no one had done Alcatraz. That wasn't a prison break
yeah,
movie, but like,
exactly.
it's a cool location. So you put it on your list.
It
And by the way, me and the screenwriter of View to a Kill both stole the climbing up the
yeah,
tow line from a Michael York World War I movie called Zeppelin. No one did. Very obscure movie, but that
cool.
action beat is from that movie. I'm sure we both went, "Oh, this is a terrible movie," but that's
Yeah.
a crackerjack moment.
Oh, Michael
I
York.
will tell you my most, because this is unstealable. I wrote a sequel to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It was suggested to me by a producer named David Simpkins. He was working on it and he hired me to work on it.
That's cool.
And the first action beat in it, battleships in the early part of the 20th century had a reconnaissance plane that was on this thing called a catapult on the back. And literally it threw the plane into the air.
Oh God.
Plane would do reconnaissance, and then the boat would take a wide turn, making a calm sea in its wake, and you'd land the plane, and then there was a crane that would pull the plane on the pilot back on. I
Good
wrote this
gravy.
script called Nautilus, and the opening scene is a British warship being immobilized and destroyed by a Nazi version of Captain Nemo's Nautilus. And the captain tells the observer, none of us are getting out of this alive. Get on the plane and escape. And the first action beat in the movie, imagine the Titanic end going up and someone launching a plane off the end of the Titanic as it sinks while it's being shelled by a Nazi submarine.
That's really cool.
The holy grail of action writing is, what crazy shit have I never seen?
What have I never? Yeah.
Now, no one makes movies set on World War II battleships that often. So I think my odds are pretty good that if I ever, and I've been thinking about retooling. The project's called Nautilus. I will do it as a comic book someday.
I mean, that like
but you know what I mean?
sequel to yeah.
That idea of like, you sit around going, what haven't I seen?
Well, I mean, I feel like that's that's a huge nugget of what makes particularly action stories like so compelling, is because somewhere in there, or at least especially with movies, like you watch a movie trailer and you see a glimpse of what that crazy action sequence is going to
Right.
be, and you're like, I need to see that,
Right.
because I've never seen a person wrap a fire hose around his middle and jump off of a building and then
Yeah.
swing into the like. Yeah.
No, and I'm a big listener to audio commentaries. And unlike a lot of people, one of my favorite movies is Diamonds Are Forever. And it's directed by Guy Hamilton. He directed Goldfinger and Live and Let Die and and Remo Williams, The Adventure Begins. He directed that.
Nice.
But there's the scene in that where Connery is trying to find the reclusive millionaire who's been captured by Blofeld. And he goes to the house and he's greeted by two gymnasts female gymnasts, and they beat the
Yeah.
crap out of him until he
Yeah.
throw him in a pool, and he weighs so much that he's able to like keep them down and get information from them. But on
Yeah.
the director commentary, Guy Hamilton is, he's old 1,000-year-old Englishman, is like, so in the script, Sean gets to the house and there's some big fellow and they have a fight. And oh my God, we've just seen it, haven't we? Sean and another big fellow having a fight. I mean, who cares? But I was watching the Olympics with my wife and the gymnasts came on and I went, my God, these women are terrifying. Like, how amazing would it be to see a 90-pound woman who's so flexible and so athletic that she can just kick the shit out of Sean Connery, all 6'4" of him. That'd be great. And that's why the scene is great, because it's not the big, and it's just, that movie also has that great fight in the elevator. And it's in this really tiny elevator in Amsterdam. And it's a really great brutal fight scene. And that came from, they were visiting the production designer who lived in one of those old London apartment buildings that has an elevator that literally two people can stand in.
Yeah.
A third person, they'd all have to be touching. And they were going to see Ken Adam in his apartment building. It was him and the producer. And they were like this in the elevator. He's like, what if Sean had to get into a fight with another 6-foot tall guy in this elevator? Like, how the hell would...
Why do I not remember this scene?
And in the movie, Connery goes to sucker punch the guy, and the elevator has glass walls, and he puts his arm back to punch, and his elbow goes through the...
Oh, yes, I do remember that. Yeah.
Alerting the other guy,
Yeah.
who then turns around, and it becomes a big thing. But it's like, that could have been any fight.
Yeah.
But Guy Hamilton in an elevator went, how the hell would two guys even get far enough away from each other to throw a punch in this elevator? That is a fascinating physical problem.
I feel like that is also some of like the best stuff with James Bond, is like, I feel like they try to find those moments for him,
but like
constantly.
In the worst Bond movies and in the more recent ones, it's super common. The end of No Time to Die, he's running through a facility.
I still haven't even seen it yet.
This is not a spoiler, believe me. It's
okay.
It's in every movie since Pierce Brosnan.
I enjoyed Spectre.
And every time he turns a corner, there's 3 more guys with AK-47s and he machines gun them. It's a first-person shooter. It's not an action.
Oh.
It's, it's not, nothing's at stake. No henchman, no anonymous henchman is going to turn around and put a bullet in him. That's never going to happen.
I have noticed, like, with the newer movies, they kind of blow their wad on like the opening scene, and then that's like,
and then
that's it.
It's just like, man, if I ever write a scene where, and there are great ways to where one person is up against 100 people and manages to get out alive.
Yeah.
In some movies, that's like
I'm sure Winter Soldier, the Russos probably, they may have taken that whole scene from Diamonds.
Oh yeah, definitely. Those guys have seen a James Bond movie. That's not.
Oh yeah.
But there's a movie called Between Heaven and Hell. It's a World War II movie, and at the end of it, Robert Wagner, his best friend's been wounded.
Robert Wagner.
They're on an outpost on a Pacific island. His best friend's been wounded. They have no medical assistance. He has to get from his outpost to the base to get a medic to go back and help his friend. And between him and the base is an entire platoon of Japanese soldiers. Ooh. And he loads up a BAR rifle, heavy machine gun, and he runs through the jungle. And it's just that thing of like, it's a suicide mission and he just makes it. But because of the kind of movie it is, you're like, any one of these guys could do it. It's a downbeat anti-war movie. So you're like, any one of these guys could put a bayonet in him and that'll be the end of the movie. And we'll all cry. But you need to convince the audience that it's possible if you're going to do that kind of scene.
Yeah.
And it's just, but when you just have a hero who's running through a maze and every time someone turns a corner with an AK-47, it's rat-a-tat-a-tat, rat-a-tat-a-tat.
Yeah.
those scenes are. I wrote one. The end of
I mean,
the end of
John Wick is that movie,
yeah.
but and you know he's not going to die by the end of it. So, and it's weird that like everybody's still like on the edge of their seats
But
with it.
but it's also partially the choreography isn't simply him turning a corner and shooting a bunch of guys, and then he turns
True, like
and shoots another bunch of
it's
guys.
the ballet of the scene
Yeah,
is what everybody's
that's
watching.
what makes the difference in it.
Yeah,
And if you don't do that ballet, and if it doesn't, this is an argument I've had in a million development rooms of like, the hero can't just be the hero because he's the handsome guy that we paid $20 million or the beautiful woman that we paid $20 million. They
yeah,
have to do things that are heroic, that are risky, that are
painful,
dangerous, and
which is
that are
why
like,
everybody loves Harrison Ford.
yeah, and that are like, holy shit, how is he going to get one of the first one of those movies I ghost wrote? My heroine wakes up and she's been kidnapped off a Pacific Island by some, basically, let's call them Spectre. You know, they were bad guy, secret agent guys.
Yeah.
And she manages to grab she manages to beat up her captor, put on his parachute, and she's on a small plane over the Pacific. Beat up her captor, put on a parachute, and one of the other commandos attacks her, and he's got a hand grenade on his, and she takes the hand grenade off, pulls the pin, drops it in the airplane, and jumps out of the airplane.
Solid
she does
scene.
not over land, by the way, you know, but it's like she knows she's going to die if she stays on the plane. So she does a crazy ass thing of throwing a grenade in the perfectly working airplane and jumping out into the night sky and pulling the ripcord and hoping for the best. The plane could be 100 feet off the ground. She doesn't know that either. But
that is a Harrison Ford scene right there.
My favorite scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, as great as every action beat in that movie is, my favorite thing is him swimming to the submarine because it's batshit.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's the most like,
and
how's that gonna work out for you, dude?
And then you get like he barely makes it in there.
Yeah, yeah, but that's what's great about it is it's heroic because it's like
there's no way that's gonna work.
He's on a perfectly good boat and he's gotten away with it.
Yeah,
but they stole his girlfriend. Yep. And I think the arc is secondary by that point as what happens after that.
Oh, yeah. No, he's going after Marion.
To me, it's the like, I'm jumping off this ship and I'm swimming to a U-boat and hey, you know, we'll see where the hell that ends up. And to me, that's great heroic fiction writing.
Yeah.
Thing where the hero does the thing where you go, wait, why did you oh, Christ, okay, well, that's dangerous. You know, like that is taking a risk for another human being, and that's what you know, that's the essence of heroism.
Yeah, totally.
You know,
we are at almost 2 hours now. And I'm seeing some texts from my wife. I don't know what they say yet.
I can imagine. They're probably like the looks I'm getting from my wife. But at least
I mean, this really ended up being like a kind of a precursor to us hanging out when you get here.
Absolutely.
Which is totally cool.
One thing I want to say to you before we talk about the event is go watch Pulp today.
Okay.
And then pick a book that you like and want to read from and talk about, and we'll have you on an episode.
Oh, yes. Oh, I would love that.
Any book.
All right, fantastic.
Because I use the definition I use of pulp. Yeah. And I don't know if you know Jess Nevins. He's a great writer and historian. He's the guy that did the patients to League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. He's the one who what all Alan Moore was referencing on every single page of that book. Really smart guy. But he's particularly a historian and a librarian as well as a very good writer. And I had him on the show and I did a 3-part interview with him about what is pulp really. And because of how our culture has evolved, people think it means crime and hacks and revolvers and film noir, which they also don't know what film noir means.
It's cheap paperbacks.
Pulp is a reference to the paper the story is printed on. That's it.
Yeah.
And so pretty much anything that's ever been in a paperback novel is Pulp Fiction. And I did an episode called the First Pulp, and I read from the Odyssey.
Oh,
You know,
was
monsters.
was that like one of the first paperback books?
Oh no, I mean it was started as an oral tradition, and then but
okay,
it's been printed in paperback since then. God knows.
Very
And,
true.
Shakespeare's in cheap paperbacks now too. So it's like,
actually, that's true. Yeah,
anything that has ever, if you could have ever bought it for a quarter at the bookstore, and the pages fell out in your hand, it's Pulp Fiction.
My first comic book store when I was a kid was called Jack's Paperback Exchange, because before it was a comic book store, it was the store that our mom would bring us, because that's where it was just wall to wall used paperback books, and my sisters would buy Agatha Christie
Sure.
and Harlequin romances, and he had a couple of crates of comics, and then every time we went back, he'd have a few more crates of comics.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day he closed up shop for a week and then opened back up, and all the paperbacks were gone.
Oh,
and it was all comic books,
yeah.
But he still called it the Paperback Exchange, which, yeah.
I worked, my first job was at a bookstore, a used bookstore in Milltown, New Jersey, called the Book Swap. And I would say probably every other book behind me, if you
it's from there,
it says on the inside, after you've read it, swap it for credit. Let's see if this is one.
Oh, nice.
Oh, no, not this one. I really thought my Doc Smiths were from the Book Swap, but maybe not. But yeah, every other book on this shelf says, after you've read it, swap it for credit. The Book Swap, Milltown, New Jersey, with the phone number.
That's awesome.
Because I know I got my John Carter of Mars books from there and all that. It was a perfect job for me. But
nice.
Yeah, that was I worked there 2 nights a week for 3-4 years, starting at age 14, I think.
Oh, so, nice.
Yeah, it was funny. But anyway, yeah, I love that.
I will absolutely I will choose a book and key you in on that. I'd love to be on.
Yeah.
And just so anybody who ends up watching this mammoth conversation, so anybody that knows, David is coming to New York, as he said at the beginning. And he'll be at our store, Mega Brain Comics, on May 28th, Saturday, May 28th at 11 a.m. till 12:30 p.m.
Yes.
Signing copies of Elvira and Horrorland #1. And I'm pretty sure we have a few of your
others lying around.
Yeah, I've got some collected trades that you'll be able to sign to.
Oh,
so, it'll
sign
be fun
in the shop before I leave. Don't worry about it.
Nice. And
they didn't write.
And then how long are you in town for?
I'm New York City Tuesday night to Friday morning, and then I come. It's my Bard reunion, so I'm at Bard from Friday to Sunday, and then I fly back to LA with my wife.
Okay, all right. So we'll find some time that's non-businessy time, possibly. All right, cool.
Yeah, no, maybe I'll swing back on Sundays.
Yes,
I'll swing by at least on my way out of Annandale.
All right, cool, nice. Yeah. All right, awesome. This was amazing. Like this was way more than I could have anticipated. I could do a whole conversation just on Star Trek with you, I think.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm a huge fan. I've always been a fan, and I haven't worked on that franchise. I wrote a treatment that I thought was really good. Yeah. And sent it to IDW, and I don't think the person I sent it to at IDW ever showed it to. Sarah Gatos was the Star Trek editor at the time, and I don't think she ever laid an eye on it. I never heard about it. I ran into her at a con once, and I was like, so, I never heard back on that. And she looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. So I don't know.
That sucks.
It's still out there.
Maybe one day.
Still
I
out
mean,
there.
Star Trek's not going anywhere, so
exactly.
And
I have a feeling my feeling is that the long range plan of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, is 4 years from now, it's Captain Kirk.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've already cast him.
Yeah.
I mean, they cast his brother,
Yeah.
which I love. I love the creepy mustache.
Yeah.
And then the fact that they have Kirk actually cast,
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if
I just
this
think,
is
I mean, we don't know what year of the 5-year mission we're in the first season of Star Trek. Like, the Enterprise didn't just leave dry dock
yeah, that's
in
true.
Orbit Maneuver,
So
or in.
then we have
So who knows?
X amount of time and years that nobody's ever seen before.
Yeah. So I'm just saying they could be thinking, we'll see how long Anson Mount wants to do it, and we're prepared for the minute Anson says, I don't want to do Star Trek anymore. Commander Kirk, you are now,
Yeah.
promoted to the rank of captain and take command of the USS Enterprise. So,
I'd be into it if the show stays solid and consistent. I still would love to have a new Star Trek show that takes place in a future time that they've never gone to.
Yeah.
That's also really well written.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed that comes along one day too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't mind getting the old stuff poured out of the vintage bottles.
Not at all. Like
I just love seeing the Enterprise, as silly as it is.
It's like a cool drink of water. And on that note, my friend, I'm going to
return everyone to their Sunday evenings.
Yes. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
All right. And so for everybody else, have a good night. And please read comics. Please just read. Like if just read things, everybody, because my God, I don't think enough people are. And with that, I bid you adieu.